Savvy Business Radio, home to over 500,000 listeners per month, and runs in syndication on 8 AM/FM stations nationwide, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out in a bigger way, call 732-474-7375 or email Christina at savvybusinessradio.com.
After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/savvypatron. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. This is your host, Christina Nichman. We're joined today by Jeffrey R. Fidel, MD. He refused to live his life medicated for bipolar disorder. He is also the author of One MD's Inward Journey to Liberate Himself from Mental Suffering and the Help It Offers for those diagnosed bipolar, mentally ill, or depressed. He shares his story and shows people a new way to live a fulfilling, peaceful, and productive life. Find out more at jeffreyfidelmd.com. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. I'm so happy to have you here today. How are you?
I'm fine, Christina. Thank you for having me.
Well, I was very blessed to have you introduced to me, and you're going to talk about a subject that I've never had on the show before, and that's you having to deal with bipolar disease for many years and working yourself through to complete wellness and health and finding yourself back again. And this is going to be a great topic because I know that a lot of people I know have dealt with mental illness and such, and it has a bad stigma, so people don't want to deal with it. You might have a family member, a husband, a coworker, and it's much easier just to say, oh, look, they have a problem, instead of how can we have compassion, understand, and help that person work through their own healing. But before we go to all of that, share a little bit about your background, what led you to the work you're now doing.
Sure. My background is I grew up in Great Neck, New York. I went off to college. I went to Brandeis University, and that's really when my depression or my life with mental illness started. So that's about age 18 or so. When I started feeling depressed, so to say. And I was actually medicated about that time. And so then I just went on with my life. So I finished college and then I went to medical school. Mm-hmm. I went to Tulane University. And then when I was completed with medical school, I went on to residency in Miami. And then my mental illness started to accelerate. And that's the time about 28 or so that I was diagnosed formally as bipolar type 1. Mm-hmm. And then I continued working as a diagnostic radiologist. I did a fellowship in MRI. So I was really just going through, life, kind of doing my thing. I went to school and I became a doctor. And I was very successful in the Western world, so to say. But then what happened was when I was, so this is now 15 years later, about 43, mm-hmm. Then I got divorced. And the trauma of the divorce really set me into a tailspin. And then right after that, my dog died. Oh. And then after that, I decided I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. And then after that, I threw my medications away. Mm. And I would spend almost the next 2 years, I'd say a year and a half or so, in almost complete solitude, discovering myself in a way and this is now what I want to bring forth and help people heal themselves, because like you say, many people, they want to go run to the doctor. They want the fix, so to say. But we are our greatest teachers, and we can do a lot inside of ourselves, and that's kind of like what I want to bring forth.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm curious about a couple things. What exactly is bipolar for anyone who's listening who said, I've never heard of that, I don't know what it is, and explain a little bit about what that is.
Well, psychiatry in the Western world have bipolar as, is once known as manic depression. Mm-hmm. But bipolar is being attributed to a genetic basis, chemical imbalance basis. It's all focused on the mind, and this is what modern science is trying to establish, that this is a new kind of disease or disorder that's come forth. But in the end, just like any other mental disorder, whether it's bipolar, depression, anxiety, what have you, it's the thoughts in the person's mind that are causing the patient to suffer, whether they be visual thoughts or auditory thoughts. And so it's as simple as that. Science likes to categorize things or label things. It's just the way science is. It's easier to kind of make a science out of something and break things down into components. But in the end, someone that suffers with bipolar is really tormented by the thoughts in their mind. They could be suicidal thoughts or any thoughts. So what I know now, and that's the depression part, obviously, if people are saying to themselves all day, I don't want to live anymore, I don't want to go on anymore.
Yeah. That's
labeled as depression. They're hearing those thoughts in their mind and they're identified with those thoughts. What bipolar is that, I could only know this now, if we can shut the thoughts off in the mind, then we don't have to hear that anymore. And of course, it feels great not to hear those kinds of thoughts in our minds. So then we become happy or manic, so to say. The only problem is that when the thinking mind starts again, then the thoughts of suicide or all the bad thoughts come again. And then pretty much the mind is now trapped into two states, that of depression and that of mania with nothing in between.
Now, is there a positive side? Because the mania sounds like it could be a good thing for you because you're living to super happy and stuff. Could it be a good thing or not really?
Well, it's a state of mind. Who we think we are is, it's kind of this. We can never see inside someone's mind. It might be good to say that, oh, I want to be happy all the time, but actually it's kind of a kind of torture because let's say, one was at a situation where you don't want to be happy, like a funeral, so to say. And you're just now in a state of mania or happiness. It's kind of, it's not really a natural state. A more natural state is a state of being where if someone, passed away, that you cry, stuff comes out of, it's just a very natural response to something. So, it's kind of like an artificial state of mind, so to say.
Interesting.
And it goes very deep into the subconscious of why these types of things are, created.
Now, this is interesting because we talked before the interview about how a lot of this is created through the thinking mind, the rational mind, and that's not where your real true self is. And my question is, would most disease be attributed or could be attributed to part of us living in that rational mind?
Yes, the Western world is very intrigued with intelligence and rationalization. In fact, I call modern psychiatry the collective intellectualization of human suffering, because, as Freud knew, intellectualization is one of the greatest defense mechanisms used. In fact, I used it myself my entire life. If I went to a psychiatrist, I would intellectualize every single thing because I was subconsciously protecting myself. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but that's really what I was doing. So by breaking human suffering into a science and, attributing to genetic basis, a biochemical basis, chemical imbalance, that's intellectualizing it. The suffering goes all the way back to even the doctors that are doing it. It goes back to even early childhood, even before our earliest memories. So it's very hard to delve into the self so far. So when Western science is looking for the self, they're looking to the brain and to the mind. But what the ancients knew and what I used as my teachings is to look to the heart, because the heart is really where the core of the human being is. Even the Latin for heart is the core is center, and that's where we reside. And all human beings in their hearts, we're all the same, and this is the intelligence of our heart.
Wow. This reminds for me, as someone who came on recently, you said that in Chinese medicine, the first brain is considered to be the heart of everything. It's where you make your greatest decisions, and everything is from the heart. And it's not interesting, because when I make decisions where I'm not just making a rational decision and I confer to going deeper and saying, what does my heart have to say with this? I might not even intellectualize it. Just I go a little bit deeper, and then I usually end up in a place where I make a better decision. Does that make sense?
That's true. The mind, I call the mind impulsive, because what the mind does is it can react on thought. But what the heart, the intelligence of the heart knows is that to wait, because the thought that comes isn't necessarily the best thing. Thoughts come and go all day, and if we react on our every thought, then we're just impulsive all day. So what our heart knows is not to react on every thought, to hold back and await for the proper solution to come about before an action is taken. And that's the intelligence of the heart.
Wow. So if you are getting in touch more with your heart, how do you begin to do that? And how do you know when you're listening to your heart and when you're listening to rational brain?
Yeah, the heart is more non-word. The heart's more without words. So the best way one can start to connect with their heart or reconnect with their heart is to allow themselves to feel their heart again. Subconsciously, I didn't want to feel heartbreak again. It's not a fun thing to do. So, when I was heartbroken, I guess when I was in college, so to say, I broke up with a girl, or so to say, I didn't want to feel that again. But with the heart, there's really no words. So what we do is we could bring our mind's attention to the heart area and just allow ourselves to feel things within the being of ourselves. In other words, it's kind of like a meditation where we bring our mind's attention to the heart without saying heart or any words, because the mind always wants to put that analysis or label or words on things. But there is a way of just feeling something without labeling it, and that's kind of where we begin to discover our heart. It's really when we still our minds and quiet it down that we begin to learn the intelligence of our heart. And our heart actually has a voice to it, and it takes a very long time to listen to our heart. So when the Buddha says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, he means the voice from our own heart. That is our teacher. In complete stillness, we can actually hear our heart. Our heart has something to say to us. And this is what I learned inside of myself, mainly using teachings of the Tao Te Ching as my guide to journey inward.
Tao Te, how do you say it?
The Tao Te Ching.
Is it Chinese in nature? Is it Chinese school?
Yes, that's written by Lao Tzu, like 2,500 years ago.
Wow.
And, that was the book that I utilized to connect with my heart. When we say that someone does something from their heart, that's exactly what it means. It means that there's a passion beyond it, that it's not just, the mind wants attention. Sometimes if we see someone, they're just performing, but we can see that they're performing not from their heart. They're performing more to almost please another person, so to say. It's not really coming from the depths of their soul, so to say.
Yeah.
But when we see a performance where it's just, oh my God,
wow, yeah,
what was that? It's almost from somewhere else. We know they're coming from their heart and not just from their mind.
Wow, that's amazing. And you had mentioned a little bit about how psychology and Western medicine kind of sees things intellectually. Now, where does the subconscious come into that? Is that part of the whole heart working and in heart intelligence when they talk about subconscious?
Well, the subconscious, and this was my journey inward, and this is why I had to endure immense suffering, inhumane suffering, in order to find this. Because in the subconscious, for example, for 5 months, I only know this now, of course, but for 5 months, I truly thought I was God's messenger. My mind was creating visions. This would be labeled in society as a state of schizophrenia. So in my mind, I was called to the beach by my mind's own created version of a god. So I got in my car, I went to the beach. These are such scary states of mind.
Wow.
I could only, know back now that this is all in my mind, but what I was able to come to the realization, and this saved my life actually, was that my mental representation of what was going on with my mind's creation of a vengeful God and all these things was actually unresolved childhood conflicts with my parents. So, if I hadn't come to that realization, I would have been taken away by that dream that my mind was creating. And, I wouldn't be here to tell the story today. I'd be locked up in the institution. So throughout the whole thing, no matter how much mental suffering I endured, I went on. And that's kind of like, I didn't know that there'd be a way out, actually, and I didn't know what the way out was, but the way out was going further into my heart. And then I found something there, and now I'm able to tell the story today. So that's how it happened for me.
It's interesting because almost every culture has their own teaching or understanding of God. Now that you've done your inner work, do you have a relationship or do you have an understanding of God? Does God exist for you?
God to me is just, it's a conceptual thing, because that's why everyone has their own. If you ask one person who God is, they'll give you one answer. If you ask another person who God is, they'll give you another answer. So God is a concept. That's what it is to me.
Yeah.
Who we truly are is just a part of all. That's essence. So much science is looking at the universe like, where is the life? But it's not like that. Is that we are that we're the observer, and what's being observed are actually the same, because everything that composes us, and this is going to be, this is what I want to show scientifically, even our minds is made of carbon, oxygen, water, fat, all that stuff that makes up our very mind that is even creating the thought was forged in the very universe we're looking at. So what's being observed is the universe is looking at itself through us. And this is the concept of non-duality that's not really embraced or known very well in the Western world.
Yeah, it's kind of seen as a very bizarre thing to say, like, well, I'm part of the whole, but we're all separate, because it looks like, when you go out into the real world and you look at people, it looks like everything from rocks to trains to people are separate from you. But I remember as a kid, my dad was fascinated with NASA and space travel, and he wanted to find new life on new planets. And I said to him, but how will we know when we find it? Because we're assuming life will be like the way we see it now here on Earth, the way we see people, that has to be water-based or whatever. How do we know it's not something totally different, or that all the planets themselves are not alive already, or the actual solar system? We're seeing it through a very narrow field of what we think alive is.
But we're basically that, because even the measurements that we're doing, NASA's taking measurements, there's the cosmic radiation background. We're in that very measurement. There's nothing separate from anything. We are that. It's a measurement of, the universe is taking a measurement of itself through us.
It's amazing.
In other words, even scientifically, a human being, we didn't just come here from nowhere. The Earth formed the accretion disk from the sun, and then life arose, and then eventually humanity came. And then one day, thought came. And then we thought that we could figure it out, but we can't figure out what it is, because if we figure out what it is, then it's just a thought of what it is, but that's not what that is, because we came from that. I think in Christian religion, they talk about, Jesus talks about the Father. I'm not very much into religion. I never have been, but, our Father, so to say, is the universe itself, because we're all born of the existence, because that's who we are. We are of existence. So, the universe is us. That's us.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. For anyone, now we talked about this earlier that you use meditation and such, but say you've never meditated, there's some people listening in and says, I want to start to get in touch with my heart. And you said really the first step is really starting to get quiet, letting that stillness come into you. If someone's not a very still person, do you have any tips for them to really get started in creating that space for stillness?
Yeah, so stillness is really our ability to be present. This moment, even when we speak right now, this present moment is the moment where life occurs. This is where essence self lives. Our essence self lives in this moment because we're existing now. Mm-hmm. Now, people, even when we speak right now, there might be thoughts in their mind. And the more heavy the thought is in the mind of the individual, thought is kind of like our internal sense. So it could almost blind us when we're heavy in thought to what's going on in the moment of right now. Stilling the mind means coming into presence. And that means to draw the mind's attention to now. And the main ways that we do this really is the breath. I find the breath is our best anchor because when we breathe, we're exchanging with our environment or our outer body, so to say, because we have air inside of ourselves, there's air outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So the breath, we could feel the breath come into us, fill our lungs, and come out of ourselves. And the practice is just to feel that sensation mm-hmm. without the mind trying to say, now I'm breathing in the air and now I'm breathing out the air. Because the mind always wants to put words into something. Yeah. But there is a way to breathe, to just have the mind just not narrate everything that's going on in life, not label everything. But just when we breathe, it's a very good way to still ourselves, because then we can just could really just feel that air coming in and then coming back out, with no words at all to it. And I think that's why the breath has always been used through thousands of years to anchor somebody into the moment of now.
Wow. I really like that you're going here, because I realize even for myself on a day-to-day basis, we go through life on the train, you see something, I notice my mind is always chattering about something nonstop. Chatterbox! Slow down! But
the funny thing is that we can look around and we can't even know that somebody's mind is chattering. So everything to us looks like everyone is nice and peaceful, you know? Yeah. And yet inside the mind of the typical Westerner is that chattering, that incessant chattering that's going on. But when we look at someone, we can't know that. Yeah. And that's kind of like why, you know, we can't read other people's minds.
Yeah, a good thing we don't. We don't need more chatter than we already have. But you know, it's interesting, Jeff. Many years ago, I just started a job. I was quite young, and someone said to me, "I just love your peace. You're such a peaceful person." And I thought, "Are you serious?" Because I was the most not peaceful at that time, and war inside all the time. And so I thought, "Wow, she sees peace, and that's not what I feel." So yeah, it's interesting. You can see what you think is someone being calm on the outside, not always inside though.
Yes, that's correct. And that's why there's like, you know, there's a funny thing. I forgot what movie. I think it was the Addams Family movie. Someone shows up the door and he looks just like a regular person. Mm-hmm. It was Halloween, and they go trick or treat, and he goes, you know, the person's like, well, who are you? And he's like, I'm a serial killer. I look like anyone else.
Oh, that's scary.
And that's like the joke, because you can't tell what another person is thinking, you know? He's a serial killer, you know, he's not dressed up as a monster or anything. He just looks like a regular person. And yet that's the danger of the mind, that we can't know how much turmoil is within somebody's mind by just looking at them.
Wow. Well, this has been such a fascinating talk. I want to thank you for coming out to share it. But before we go, please share with our audience how they can get in touch with you, work with you, find out more about you.
Sure. I have a website. It's jeffreyfidelmd.com. That's JEFFREYFIDELMD.com. I also have a book that's on that website, and the name of the book is I, one ND's inward journey to liberate himself from mental suffering. And the book explores some of the concepts of non-duality as well as the states of mind that I went through in order to find myself outside of thought. And then anyone that's listening to the show that's interested, I am currently, trying to do as many public speakings as I can. At this moment, I've done a few. Any psychiatrist, psychologist, or anyone that's listening that would be interested in having me either volunteer in some way or to share or help other people in some way, they could reach out to me through the website, or even my email is jfidelmd@gmail.com. I'm really out here to try and help other people. I know that there's a lot of mental suffering going on in the world, and it's really my goal to help out in any way I can.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for coming to share your wisdom today, your very important story and wisdom with our audience. Thank you so much for coming to Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you, Christina, for having me. It's been a pleasure.